Hi guys, welcome to this week's webcast. Today we're going to be talking about membranes. Membranes are going to be a thin, pliable layer that cover or separate. Thin, pliable layer that cover or separate. And they're going to be made up of both connective tissue and epithelium. So we're not talking about just one type of tissue now. It has both connective tissue and epithelium. Two types we're going to be talking about are mucous membranes. The first one's mucous membranes. First off, they secrete mucus, as you can imagine. They're found lining the inside of hollow organs, and they're continuous with the outside world. So what do I mean by all that? Continuous with the outside world, the best way to visualize it is thinking of the trachea, running from the mouth to the lungs. So starting at the mouth, or the outside world, it runs in and dumps off the air that you breathe in the lungs for oxygen. You can see how it's continuous with both the inside and outside of the body. I've just drawn an example here. See, if you imagine that this is the cross section looking down the trachea, you have right here the lumen. Next you have a layer of epithelium. Epithelium. Try not to make spelling mistakes. And the final layer is going to be that connective tissue layer, or lamina propria. Lamina propria. You can tell by the relationship of the epithelium to the connective tissue that the apical surface is going to be facing the lumen, and the basal surface is going to be facing the connective tissue. That's always going to be that way. So always remember that when the connective tissue is found on the basal side of the epithelium, and that epithelium is connected to the connective tissue below by loose areolar connective tissue. Loose areolar connective tissue. The other type of membrane we're going to be talking about is a serous membrane. Those differ by lining the outer layer of major visceral organs, the outer layer of major visceral organs, as a contrast, and visceral organs are going to be referred to as your guts. So it's the organs found inside your body. And these are not continuous with the outside world, so it's completely contained within your body. There's going to be two major layers, two main layers. We'll just call them two layers. And those are going to be the visceral and parietal layer. Now don't get confused with these replacing the epithelium connective tissue, because this serous membranes still have the epithelial and connective tissue layers, but these are layers that are in addition to that. This visceral layer, I just said that's guts, and so if it's synonymous with guts or those kinds of organs, it's probably going to be the inner layer of the serous membrane. The inner layer. The parietal is going to be the outer layer of the serous membrane. And what's special about these two layers is that they're actually continuous with each other. So how do you make two layers, or two separate layers, that aren't distinct layers, that they're continuous with each other? We'll draw a picture to illustrate that. So we're talking about serous membranes. So remember. And let's draw our parietal layer. So we're going to get some sort of membrane that's surrounding a visceral organ. But we can't have it connect here, or else it won't be able to be continuous with the visceral layer inside. So what it's going to do is double back on itself, come back around, create the visceral layer, and then hook back up with the parietal layer. So we've got parietal layer, and our visceral layer. And you can see now that you can have an inside layer and an outside layer, but have them be continuous with each other. So if there's an inside layer and an outside layer already, how do we get an epithelial layer and a connective tissue layer? Good question. What I'm drawing here is going to represent our epithelial layer, or more the apical side of our epithelial layer. And what this yellow is going to represent is our connective tissue layer. So now you can see that with a visceral and parietal inner outer layer, we can also have a connective tissue layer and an epithelial layer. The best way to conceptualize how this serous membrane is to think of it as a deflated beach ball. deflated beach ball. So if you deflate a beach ball, you can see how it folds in on itself, and you could wrap it around something. For the case of our example here, since I said it wraps around a major visceral organ, we'll say that the heart is inside here. So we're talking about the pericardium now. P-E-R-I, peri, or around, and cardium, which is similar to cardia, or heart, the pericardium. That's going to be the specific serous membrane we're talking about. So in between our visceral and parietal layers is something going to be called, referred to as serous fluid, which I think is a fantastic name for it, because all you have to remember is it's the fluid found within the serous membrane, and you're going to remember it's serous fluid. So now we've got connective tissue, epithelium, serous fluid, epithelium, and connective tissue. It's important to note that the the epithelium in serous membranes are referred to as mesothelium. Mesothelium. This equals epithelium. And it's simple squamous epithelium. Now I've created a dilemma though, because if you look deep to superficial, these aren't the same, they don't have the same relationships. So in words, let's look through a cross section of our serous membrane. First off, right here we've got our connective tissue, followed by, let's write this in the same color, connective tissue, followed by, it's supposed to be in yellow, our epithelium, or mesothelium, then our serous fluid, then back to our mesothelium, and then all the way back to our connective tissue, in the right color this time. And we've created our, in words, our visceral layer, and our parietal layer. So visceral and parietal. And this is going to be deep to superficial. Just to reiterate it, this is this connective tissue here, this is this mesothelium here, we have the serous fluid in the middle, we have our next mesothelium, and our next connective tissue. And here it's important to recognize that the connective tissue is deep to mesothelium and visceral on the visceral side, and the mesothelium is deep to the connective tissue on the parietal side. And that visceral side is adjacent to that major organ. So if you can look at that on the macroscopic level there, we'll look at it microscopically here. And first we'll create our connective tissue on our visceral side, followed by our layer of mesothelium, followed by our serous fluid, we'll just write that out, followed by another layer of mesothelium, which is simple squamous epithelium. These all have nuclei, and connected to the underlying connective tissue via loose areolar connective tissue and reticular fibers. And then we'll follow up again with our next layer of connective tissue. So if our heart is over here, which side is this? On this side we have our visceral layer, and then on this side we've created our parietal layer. So this is what it looks like on a more microscopic level of the same cross section we took here. So thanks for watching this next webcast, and I'll talk to you guys next week.